We are continuing in the life of Paul. In last week, I think I forgot to bring something up that is important. And I don't know why I skipped over it or that it somehow I missed it. I went back and looked, and I think I skipped it. And that is that Paul has a sister. Paul has a sister. She lives in Jerusalem. At least later on by Acts 23, she obviously lives in Jerusalem. Now, did she live in Jerusalem before that? We don't know. But we know from Acts chapter 23 and verse 16, so when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Okay, so and this is not a man because it is understood by the Romans that this is just a boy. He's just a boy, and so his sister. First off, he has a sister, and that's all we know. Does he have? Are there any other siblings? We don't know, but he has a sister, and by Acts 23, she's in Jerusalem. Now, it is very possible. This is speculation. It's very possible that at a certain age in Paul's life, that he didn't just go to Jerusalem to learn from Gamaliel and getting a very strict education in Jerusalem. It could have been that the whole family, parents and siblings, however many that may have been, all went to Jerusalem as well. But we do know he was born in Tarsus, and we do know he was educated at whatever point that education began. And it could be that his education began preteen years, or I simply don't know. I don't know when that might have been that he would have gone to Jerusalem, or they all would have gone to Jerusalem for him to be educated under Gamaliel. And the fact that he is taught under Gamaliel does have a bearing on as far as the Jews are concerned, and as far as like at least the Pharisees and the powers that be, having been taught by Gamaliel, held some weight. That was, as we have pointed out, he does have a resume, and it's a really good resume concerning his credentials as a Jew. And it goes from that of obviously a descendant of Abraham, a Hebrew, tribe of Benjamin, circumcised the 8th day, Pharisee, son of a Pharisee, taught in the strictness of the law under Gamaliel. He has this resume that would have been impressive there in Israel, in Palestine. It would have been impressive there. But really, it wouldn't have been impressive anywhere else. That it would have been seen as just kind of an oddity. When Paul is in Athens, they would not have recognized Gamaliel. I don't think they would have recognized his name, and they definitely wouldn't have recognized him as being anyone that you'd want to be taught by. They would have their own teachers, and his credentials as a Jew would be pretty much meaningless to the rest of the world, that it wouldn't mean so much. But coming back to this, he does have a sister, and she lives in Jerusalem. Now, we don't know anything about his parents, other than he had to have parents. And we know that his father was a Pharisee. And that is all we know. Did they live in Jerusalem? I speculated it's possible that they did live in Jerusalem. Did he have any contact with them? We don't know if he did or not. He did go back to Tarsus after he went to Jerusalem in Acts chapter. Let's get my. I don't know why that happens every now and then. After he goes to Jerusalem and tries to to, uh, to do things in Jerusalem, he does go back to Tarsus. And was that going back to his parents? I don't know. But that would be a familiar stomping ground to him. He wouldn't know Tarsus. He would know the culture. He'd know the people. He would know who that was. But we're getting ahead of ourselves in all this. So before we go any further, and we are going to go into, begin in Acts chapter 6 today, because while we have talked about Paul being at the stoning of Stephen, we do need to see what occurred there, because Paul would have witnessed it. It's not as though he was just someone that happened along. He would have been there, and I will show you why he would have had to have been there. Next is, in all this, we want to just sum up some things. One, Paul grew up in the Gentile world, so he's familiar with them. Someone like John, while he would have been around Romans and other Gentiles, he grew up in Palestine. He grew up among Jews. And so the culture of the Gentiles, and granted there's a lot of cultures because we're talking about the rest of the world, would have been very alien. And to some, no doubt, it would have seemed kind of frightening to have been out of that environment, because it's not home. It's not like home. They do things you don't want happening in Palestine, you didn't witness in Palestine. And obviously there's wickedness that goes on in Palestine, but they would have multiplied idolatry going to places like Corinth or Athens or even to Tarsus. But he grew up in the Gentile world, so he's accustomed to it. He was educated in Jerusalem, strict adherence to the law, knows Greek, knows it first language. I have no doubt that Greek is basically like a first language to him. And he learned Hebrew. He would have learned Hebrew at home. Or I think it's safe to assume he learned Hebrew at home and learned Greek in the street, okay, in Tarsus. He would have heard it in the marketplaces. He would have heard it all around. And he would have had to have been bilingual growing up. From the very beginnings, he would have had to have been bilingual because there had been one language that may have been spoken at home, Hebrew, and the other that was definitely spoke outside, and that is the Greek. Now, his father's a Pharisee and a Roman citizen. Paul is also a Pharisee, like his father. His sister and her family live in Jerusalem, and they too would have been Roman citizens. If Paul was born Roman, so was she. Paul believes he's doing what is right. He has a good conscience. He has good intentions. Now, we just asked some questions. I'm not sure that we've asked these before, but we need to ask them. Where was Paul during the crucifixion? He was alive. Where was he? We don't know. He never mentions being there. He never mentions it. Where was Paul on the day of Pentecost, Acts chapter 2? We don't know. He never mentions being there, and it would have been a significant event that occurred in Jerusalem, but he never mentioned being there. That is an unknown. Did he know who Jesus of Nazareth was? Obviously he did. He knew who Jesus was. Did he meet Jesus? Until Acts chapter 9, no. Until Acts chapter 9, it doesn't appear that he ever did. But he is persecuting the church, which the Jews are calling the way. And he is persecuting those who are of the way. And he knows when Jesus answers him in Acts chapter 9, which we will get there eventually, when he asks, Lord, who are you? And the answer is, I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. Saul knows who that is. He doesn't need an explanation. He knows that the very name he's trying to stomp out is Lord. He suddenly finds that out. Now, let's go to Acts chapter 6, and we need to look at what occurs with Stephen, because Paul is there. And I'm going to show you why. All right, so we go to, let's just go to begin in verse 7. So Acts chapter 6, beginning in verse 7. We are introduced to Stephen as being one of those 6 who were chosen to help out in a problem. It was the Hellenists, the widows who were of the Hellenists were being neglected. And who are the Hellenists? The Hellenists are Greek-speaking Jews. They did not speak Hebrew. And so there was a division that is there, a segregation, if you will. It's a segregation by way of language, that you have the Jews who can speak Hebrew and the Jews who speak Greek. And it was a language that was the wall between them, language that divided them. But they're not supposed to be divided. Even by language, they're not supposed to be divided. They're supposed to do what they can, not focusing on one group or another, but getting everyone. And Stephen is introduced as one of those who is chosen to help out in this. And Stephen and all the men being chosen have to speak Greek. They have to. Otherwise, they're not going to be of much help. Okay. It would be like someone needing to help widows in the church who speak Thai. Okay. While you can deliver food or you can deliver something, you can't know what the needs are, what the current needs are, because you can't communicate. And you'd have to have a Christian who speaks Thai to do that. Well, in this case, you have to have a Jew who speaks Greek to do this. And Stephen is not a Hebrew name. Stephen is a Greek name. Saul is a Hebrew name, but Stephen is a Greek name. And so he does speak Greek, and he's going to be teaching / arguing with the Jews who speak Greek. So we come to verse 7. The word of God spread, and the number of the disciples multiplied greatly in Jerusalem, and a great many of the priests were obedient to the faith. So here we see among the Levites, among the priests, there were priests who were obedient to the gospel. They were obedient to Christ. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. So he has faith and he can perform miracles. He's doing it. So there is a confirmation that Stephen is from God. All right? He's a teacher approved of God. Nicodemus came to that conclusion concerning Christ. We know that you are a teacher from God because no one can do these things except God be with him. He knows. That's the conclusion. Okay? And it would be madness, of which it is. It would have been madness to have seen the miracles of Christ and want him dead. That's madness. But it continues on. It would be madness to see miracles being performed by his followers. By his followers, not just anybody, but by the followers of Christ. And I would say it's even more madness. It's just compiled madness to where you know that Jesus was performing miracles and you got rid of him. Now his followers are performing miracles and you want to be rid of them. Okay? This is just compounding upon itself. It's proof upon proof upon proof upon proof that you're going against the will of God. You're going against God. You are persecuting God. All right? So Stephen shows miracles. Then there arose some from what is called the synagogue of the freedmen. Look at this. Cyrenians, Alexandrians, and those from Cilicia and Asia. Well, Tarsus is in Cilicia. That's where Paul's from. So it would be his fellow Cilicians. I don't want to call it, you've got to be careful not to call them sissies. But these fellow Cilicians are there. And he would be among those as well, because they're all one and the same. That is, they speak Hebrew, and they all come from these, they all speak Greek. Not all of them speak Hebrew. He does. But they all speak Greek, and they have something in common, that they lived in these Gentile areas. And here's this area that has Jews who are come from his home. And places like Alexandria, of course, that's in Egypt. Asia is modern day Turkey, and so they're coming from different places. Disputing with Stephen. So Stephen is there among them. He can speak Greek, and they are disputing with him. And they were not able, look at this, they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. So not only is he performing miracles and signs, he's performing these signs and wonders, he also is giving them a wisdom and a reasoning they cannot deny. Well, they're denying it, but they cannot overthrow it. They recognize it. They're not able to resist the wisdom that he gives. Then they secretly induce men to say, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and God. Okay, here's another part of madness. When you have to lie or get men to lie on behalf of a cause, the cause is wrong. Okay, when you have to do that, it's time to take an internal check to know the cause is wrong. Why am I bringing this out? Because Saul of Tarsus quite likely, I think definitely, was among these men and would have fit in these categories. One, they would have seen the faith, he would have seen the faith and the wonders and signs among the people that Stephen did. He would have seen that, or at least been well aware of it. He would have been one of those that could not, while he could dispute with him, and I'm not saying that Paul was active in that, but I think he would have witnessed it. I think there's very good evidence that he witnessed it, that even he could not resist the wisdom and the spirit by which Stephen spoke. Now, nevertheless, Paul still thought he was right. He still thought he was right. And these would have been things setting him up to the final. It's more than a straw that broke the camel's back. It's a mountain that broke the camel's back. And that of Christ on the way to, meeting Christ on the way to Damascus. But let's continue on. So, in verse 11, they induce men to lie. All right, blasphemous words against Moses and God. And Stephen wasn't. Stephen was preaching Moses the way Moses was meant to be preached. And he's speaking concerning God, by which Moses spoke of God, and the prophets of the Old Testament spoke of God. He is only bringing out precisely what they were bringing out, saying these things are going to happen. There's going to be a Messiah. These things are going to happen. You are to accept him. And what's Stephen doing? He's saying the same thing, except now is the time to where he can be identified. And identified, provably identified. Okay, So we come to verse 12. And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes, and they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. They also set up false witnesses who said, "This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and the law. For we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs which Moses delivered to us." And all who sat in the council looked steadfastly at him, saw his face as the face of an angel. Now we'll get to verse 15 in just a second. But notice what they're saying. He's speaking blasphemy. That Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place. All right, this goes back into a claim against Christ, that Christ will destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. That was one of the charges they had against him to the Romans. Okay, that he said he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Okay, when is that a crime? To say something that, if you think it's absurd, if you think it can't be done, maybe he's a madman. Okay, maybe he's a madman. Or maybe you're not telling us the truth on this, or you have completely misunderstood, because Jesus didn't say that. He wasn't talking about the temple complex whatsoever when he's talking about that. He's talking about his body, which he did. Okay. Now, this goes right hand in hand to that, and I could just see what, or just imagine what the Romans would have thought at that of, since when do you take someone who's saying crazy things like that? If he's saying that, and suddenly this is a capital offense. When did this occur? Okay, when did this ever occur? And if there was anybody that was going to destroy the temple and wasn't going to rebuild it, it's going to be the Romans who do that. And of course, it's going to be Romans who are allowed to do it because God allowed them to do it. Now, what they say concerning this, for we have heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place. Matthew chapter 23, he did say that. And it was a prophecy. He did say that. And it was something that they would have been very wise to have listened to. And change the customs which Moses delivered to us. Actually, that's not precisely true. That would be an interpretation. And here is the crime. Saying that Jesus is going to destroy this place, that's a crime? That's a crime? How did that become a crime? A man who's not even on this earth anymore, they would all agree with that. And now they wouldn't agree that he resurrected and ascended into heaven. They would not agree with that. But all would agree he's not present in the flesh here anymore. And somehow this is a crime. Okay? And change the customs which Moses delivered to us. Actually, it's what God promised would happen. Not only prophesied, but promised that the law of Moses, the law and the prophets, all of that would be fulfilled. Not destroyed, but fulfilled. Jeremiah 31:31 spoke specifically of a new covenant with Israel that wasn't like the one they broke, not like the one from Mount Sinai. It's very specific about that. In case you think figuratively that somehow Jeremiah is speaking of returning back to the old law, he's not talking about that. God is not talking about that through Jeremiah. It's that there's going to be a new covenant, not the one that was made on Sinai, but something new. Jeremiah spoke about it. And I have no doubt that Stephen, who would have known his Scripture and possibly could have been, I say definitely now, definitely an inspired speaker, and I'm going to tell you why I believe that. An inspired speaker, that he would have brought these things out. Doesn't mean they liked it, but he would have brought these things out. Now, we come to, okay, why do I think he was an inspired speaker? Because we have his sermon recorded for us here once we get into chapter 7. That sermon is recorded for us. Obviously, it's inspired of God. And there isn't anything he says that's invalid.
Well, it also says he's full of the Holy Spirit.
Full of the Holy Spirit. Yes, he is. And he's able to do these other things, and I have no doubt that he's able to as it shows in all this, they were not able to resist his wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. Okay, and that they can't do anything but lie about it, misinterpret it, misrepresent it. That's all they can do. And so we come to this, verse 15. And all who sat in the council, looking steadfastly at him, saw his face as the face of an angel. Now, I don't know what that looks like, except perhaps innocence, or there's something else that I'm not quite sure. I can't explain. Okay. My first thought is that, and it is innocence. He is not a man who is vindictive. He's not a man who's just blow for blow or eye for eye. He's not like that whatsoever. He is, while they are angry, he is not. While they are furious, he is not. And it would also appear he's not even frantic. It appears like they are just this mass of intimidating men, angry, and he doesn't appear to move one way or another. And is not fearful of them. He's not fearful of death. He is facing them head on. And they're going to kill him. And even with his final words, they don't want to hear that. His final words they don't even want to hear. Because they know, they see he's different from them. Now, having a face like an angel is, I can't answer it beyond that. Because how many of them had seen an angel? I don't know. I don't think any of them had seen an angel. So there is a meaning in this that there's a power in his demeanor that can be seen just by his demeanor. It can be seen, and he's not like the frothing, spewing crowd. He is very different from them. Now, we go to chapter 7. Then the high priest said, "Are these things so?" And he said, "Brethren and fathers, listen. The God of glory appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he dwelt in Haran." Anything wrong with that fact? He doesn't say that, but they would agree. They would agree, yeah, that's exactly right. Now, what's he doing? First off, he's starting from, he's building bridges is what he's doing. He's building bridges to try to help them come to the truth. All right? We know this is true. We confirm this is true. We have believed this all of our lives. And he's saying, it's true. What you thought was true is in fact true. He's not blaspheming any of these. He's confirming it. And said to him, "Get out of your country and from your relatives and come to a land that I will show you." Then he came out from the land of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran. And from there, when his father was dead, he moved him to this land in which you now dwell. And God gave him no inheritance in it, not even enough to set his foot on. But even when Abraham had no child, he promised to give it to him for a possession and to his descendants after him. But God spoke in this way, that his descendants would dwell in a foreign land, and that they would bring them into bondage and oppress them for 100 years. Anything wrong with this? He's confirming Genesis. When he's confirming Genesis, he's confirming Moses. What's he got against Moses? Well, absolutely nothing. I mean, really, who's got something against Moses? Stephen or this synagogue of the freedmen? Really, it's the synagogue of the freedmen. That's who has something against Moses, and it's a misunderstanding, just actually a willful misunderstanding of what Moses spoke concerning the Christ. Other things, I mean, concerning Abraham, yeah, they would have no problem with anything Moses said about Abraham, but connecting Moses to Jesus of Nazareth, no way were they going to allow that. Not without a stoning. There's no way. Verse 7, and the nation to whom they will be in bondage, I will judge, says God, and after that they shall come out and serve me in this place. So we've gone from Genesis now to Exodus and all the way to really Joshua. All the way through Deuteronomy and into Joshua in talking about that. Then he gave him the covenant, back to Genesis, of circumcision. And so Abraham begot Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac begot Jacob, and Jacob begot the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs, becoming envious, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. This is a continuation of really a rundown of Genesis, starting from chapter 12 all the way to the end. It's a rundown of it. He is confirming, if he says that he wants to change the customs which Moses delivered to us, which custom is he changing of Moses? Which custom? It's not the text, that's for sure. He's confirming the text. It would be that the covenant has changed precisely as Jeremiah said would happen, and that prophet who would be from among them has already come, exactly as Moses wrote in Deuteronomy chapter 18. That prophet has already come and gone. They are to follow him. Now, once again, who has a problem with Moses? Stephen or this synagogue of Greek-speaking Jews? Who has the problem? It's not Stephen. Verse 10, and delivered him out of all his troubles, that's delivered Joseph out of all his troubles, and gave him favor and wisdom in the presence of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Now a famine and great trouble came over all the land of Egypt and Canaan, and our fathers found no sustenance. So he's confirming once again the events of Genesis, the events of the life of Joseph, also the providence of God that is working there, the famine that occurred, Joseph being lifted from where he was. He's a prisoner in Pharaoh's prison. He's lifted from there and becomes, he's second only to Pharaoh. Verse 12, but when Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, he sent out his fathers first. Sent out our fathers first. And the second time Joseph was made known to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Then Joseph sent and called his father Jacob and all his relatives to him, 75 people. So Jacob went down to Egypt, and he died, he and our fathers. And they were carried back to Shechem and laid in the tomb that Abraham bought for a sum of money from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem. All right, now, not only is he showing what occurred in the life of Joseph, but he's also showing the prophecies of God have come true. And that's a major subject in this lesson that he's given. That the promises, the prophecies, everything came true exactly as it's supposed to. And he's showing how the nation to whom they will, the descendants of Abraham would be in bondage and oppressed. They will be in another country for 400 years. He's showing the setup for that, how that actually transpired. Verse 17. But when the time of the promise drew near, which God had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt till another king arose who did not know Joseph. This man dealt treacherously with our people and oppressed our forefathers, making them expose their babies so that they might not live. At this time Moses was born and was well pleasing to God, and he was brought up in his father's house for 3 months. But when he was sent out, Pharaoh's daughter took him away and brought him up as her own, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. So he's growing up as an Egyptian royal in the royal family. That would be the extended royal family. And we need to understand that, just as a side thing, that how many daughters how many wives did Pharaoh have? You don't know. How many daughters did Pharaoh have of those wives? You don't know that one either. How many sons of daughters of Pharaoh, how many sons of daughters of Pharaoh would have existed, would have been born? Well, you don't know that either. It could have been a mass of people. All the wives, all of his children, all of his grandchildren, and whatnot. Moses would have been in all of that. But being that he is in the extended royal family, he does have privileges, and Stephen's confirming this. Mighty in words and deeds, which is a funny thing because Moses says he's not mighty in words, at least not spoken anyway. Verse 23, now when he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brethren and the children of Israel, and seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended and avenged him who was oppressed and struck down the Egyptian. For he supposed that his brethren would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand, but they did not understand. But there is something that Moses did understand. Moses did understand that he had a position where he could be a deliverer for them. He did understand that he could be someone. Now, we just stop for the moment and ask the question, what has he said thus far that would offend them? He is confirming everything they would have believed, unless they just didn't believe the Bible, which is in certain parts, yeah, that's true. They didn't believe the Bible. In certain parts, they did not believe Moses. They did not believe the other prophets when it came to the Christ. Verse 26, and the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting and tried to reconcile them, saying, men and brethren, why do you wrong one another? But he who did his neighbor wrong pushed him away, saying, who made you a ruler and judge over us? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday? Then at this saying, Moses fled and became a dweller in the land of Midian, where he had 2 sons. And when 40 years had passed, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness on Mount Sinai. When Moses saw it, he marveled at the sight, and he drew near to observe the voice The voice of the Lord came to him, saying, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses trembled and dared not look. Then the Lord said to him, take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send you to Egypt. This Moses, whom they rejected, saying, Who made you a ruler and a judge, is the one God sent to be ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. Okay, now we don't have much time left, but I do want to make this point. Because what Moses had to endure is being repeated with men like Stephen. It's being repeated. Now, they didn't stone Moses, but they rejected him. Those that said, Who made you a ruler and a judge? Well, God is the one who made him ruler and judge. God made him the one. In time, not then, but in time, he did do that. In time, Moses is going to be the one that is the deliverer, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Not Pharaoh, not the Egyptian army, not anyone rebellious among the Jews. They couldn't stop it. And yes, all three of those tried to stop it. All three of them did in their time. And it was Pharaoh who just wouldn't stop. Pharaoh wouldn't stop at all. And Pharaoh is the one that had an extremely hard heart. He was a callous man. To see the destruction going around his own country, he didn't care. It's obvious he cared nothing for the people he ruled. It's obvious because he was going to let them suffer by his own obstinance. He's going to let them suffer. That he's not going to have any pity on them. He's not going to have any pity over the very people he rules, because he's not going to do it, because he's obstinate. He's not going to give in. Plague after plague after plague after plague. He's not going to give in. And he is a very unusual sort and destructive to himself and to his nation. Now, we're going to end here. Well, let's read verse 36. He brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years. So we've gone from the events of Exodus now through the 40 years with going to the death of Moses in Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy. All right, and we will continue next week, and he's going to show how Moses spoke of Jesus, whom they're rejecting. He spoke of Jesus and that they were to follow him, and obviously they are not. And once again, we're doing this to show what Saul of Tarsus would have heard, because it's obvious he's there. It's obvious. He would not have just suddenly been available when they wanted to kill somebody. He knew what had occurred. And all right, I want to thank everybody for being with us, and hopefully next week we can continue. Thank you, everybody.